Marcus Chen wiped sweat from his forehead as he adjusted the radio antenna on his research station. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly around the small geological survey outpost, where he spent his days monitoring seismic activity for the university. At 32, he had chosen this isolated life after losing his family in a car accident 3 years ago. The solitude helped him heal, or so he told himself. The explosion shattered the desert silence at 3:17 a.m. Marcus jolted awake in his trailer as the ground shook violently. Through his window, he saw a pillar of orange flame rising from the valley below. Grabbing his emergency kit and radio, he jumped into his Jeep and raced toward the crash site. What he found defied explanation. A sleek metallic craft had carved a smoking trench through the desert sand. The hull bore no markings he recognized, and strange symbols glowed faintly along its surface. As he approached cautiously, a section of the craft hissed open, releasing a cloud of luminescent mist. From within the mist, she emerged. Her skin held a pale blue tint that seemed to shimmer in the firelight. Silver hair cascaded over her shoulders, and her eyes were the color of liquid mercury. She wore a form-fitting suit that appeared to be leaking some kind of glowing fluid. When she saw Marcus, she stumbled forward, pressing her hand against his chest to steady herself. "If I spill over you, don't blame me," she said in accented English, her voice carrying musical undertones he had never heard before. "Your people opened the containment." Marcus stared at her, his scientific mind racing to process what he was seeing. "I didn't open anything. You crashed through my research area." He noticed the glowing substance from her suit was now on his shirt, warm and pulsing with soft light. She studied his face with those unsettling silver eyes. "Then you are not one of them. That is fortunate." Her legs gave out and she collapsed against him. The glowing liquid spread wherever she touched, but Marcus felt no pain, only a strange tingling sensation. "Who are you?" he whispered, catching her as she fell unconscious. Behind them, the craft systems began to fail spectacularly, sending sparks and strange energy pulses into the night sky. Marcus knew he had to get her away from the wreckage before someone else arrived to investigate. In the distance, he could already see the lights of approaching vehicles. The desert had just become far more complicated than seismic monitoring. Marcus carried the unconscious woman back to his trailer, her strange luminescent suit leaving glowing traces on everything she touched. He laid her on his couch and tried to radio for medical help, but every electronic device in his station was malfunctioning. The crash had somehow interfered with all his equipment. She awakened 2 hours later with a sharp gasp, silver eyes scanning the room with predatory alertness. When she saw Marcus sitting across from her with a cup of coffee, something like confusion flickered across her features. "You did not restrain me," she said, sitting up slowly. "Should I have?" Marcus offered her the spare cup he had prepared. "You're hurt, not dangerous." She examined the coffee suspiciously before taking a careful sip, her face contorted in disgust. "This liquid is extremely bitter. It's an acquired taste." Marcus studied her carefully. "What's your name? Where did you come from?" "I am Kira," she replied, setting down the coffee. "I come from a laboratory beneath your planet's surface. I was created there, grown in artificial chambers for a purpose I have only recently begun to understand." Before Marcus could respond, the sound of approaching helicopters filled the air. Kira's luminescence flared brighter as fear crossed her features. "They have found us quickly. We must leave." "Who's found us?" Marcus moved to the window and saw black helicopters circling the crash site. Armed figures were already rappelling down. The ones who made me. They call themselves the Genesis Project. Kira stood, her movements fluid despite her earlier weakness. I was meant to be a weapon, a biological interface for technology they have been developing. But something went wrong during my final conditioning. Marcus grabbed his emergency bag. Wrong how? I began to dream. Kira's eyes met his. They did not design me to dream, to question, to feel. When I started experiencing emotions they could not control, they decided to terminate the experiment. The sound of approaching vehicles grew closer. Marcus made a decision that would change everything. My jeep's in the back. Can you travel? Yes, but Marcus Chen, she said, somehow knowing his name. If you help me, your life will never be the same. They will hunt you too. Marcus thought of his lonely existence, his careful isolation from human connection since his family's death. Something about this strange woman with her silver eyes and luminous skin made him feel alive again for the first time in years. Let's go, he said simply. They escaped through the back of his trailer, just as armed soldiers surrounded the front. Marcus drove through the desert, using old mining roads he had mapped during his geological work, the jeep's headlights cutting through the darkness. Behind them, searchlights swept the landscape. They will not stop, Kira warned, her hand unconsciously touching his arm. Where her fingers made contact, that warm, glowing sensation spread through his skin. Then we keep moving, Marcus replied, pressing harder on the accelerator as they disappeared into the vast Nevada wilderness. 3 days of constant movement brought Marcus and Kira to an abandoned mining town in the Colorado Rockies. Marcus had contacted his old college roommate, Dr. Elena Vasquez, a brilliant xenobiologist who worked for a private research foundation. Elena had agreed to meet them at the old mining facility, no questions asked. Elena emerged from a modified research van as they arrived, her dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. At 40, she had the focused intensity of someone who lived for scientific discovery. When she saw Kira, her eyes widened with professional fascination rather than fear. Marcus, what have you gotten yourself into? Elena circled Kira slowly, taking readings with handheld instruments. Her cellular structure is unlike anything in terrestrial biology. But there are human genetic markers integrated throughout. The Genesis Project used human DNA as a foundation, Kira explained, allowing Elena to continue her examination. They enhanced it with genetic material recovered from an extraterrestrial source decades ago. Elena's instruments beeped excitedly. This is incredible. Your cellular regeneration rate is off the charts, and these bioluminescent secretions contain compounds I've never seen before. They are not just secretions, Kira said quietly. They are how I interface with technology. My creators designed me to merge human intuition with alien computational ability. But the process requires complete psychological conditioning. Marcus watched Elena work, remembering why they had been such good friends. She approached everything with wonder instead of fear. Elena, can you help her? The people hunting us want to complete her conditioning. Turn her into some kind of living weapon. More than a weapon, Elena said, studying her readings. If I'm interpreting this correctly, she's designed to be a bridge between biological and technological consciousness. They want to create a hybrid mind that can control vast technological networks. Kira's luminescence dimmed with sadness. I have been having dreams of the laboratory where others like me remain in stasis, If they cannot perfect the conditioning process with me, they will try with others. Elena looked up from her instruments. Then we need to find this laboratory and free them. We? Marcus stared at his friend. Elena? These people have military resources. We're talking about taking on a Black Ops project with unlimited funding. Marcus, she represents a completely new form of life. If we don't help her, they'll either turn her into a weapon or dissect her for research. Elena's voice carried the passion that had driven her through years of graduate study. Besides, since when do you back down from impossible odds? Marcus realized she was right. The old Marcus, the one before the accident, had never walked away from people who needed help. What do you need? Elena smiled. Time to study her abilities, equipment to track the source of her genetic modifications, and probably a lot of luck. As if summoned by her words, the sound of approaching aircraft echoed through the mountain valley. Kira's glow flared bright with alarm. They have found us again. How? Marcus demanded. Kira looked down at her hands, where the luminescent fluid pulsed steadily. The biological interface. They can track the energy signature, but not precisely. That is why it has taken them time to locate us. Elena grabbed her research data and headed for her van. Then we need to find a way to mask that signature, and fast. 2 weeks of preparation in Elena's hidden laboratory led to a desperate plan. Using Elena's research, they had developed a way to temporarily suppress Kira's luminescent signature, but it would only last a few hours. They had located the Genesis Project facility, buried beneath a military contractor's compound in Arizona, heavily guarded and nearly impregnable. "This is suicide," Marcus said, checking the equipment they had assembled. Elena had called in favors from former colleagues, acquiring everything from signal jammers to industrial cutting tools. "The others in the laboratory cannot wait any longer," Kira insisted. Her abilities had grown stronger during their time together, and she could now interface with electronic systems by touch. "I can feel them in my dreams, crying out for freedom." Elena adjusted her body armor. The thermal imaging shows 17 subjects in stasis chambers. If we can reach the central lab, Kira should be able to awaken them and overload the facility's systems simultaneously. Marcus looked at these two incredible women who had transformed his life. Elena, brilliant and fearless, driven by her love of discovery. Kira, artificial yet more human than many people he had known, fighting not just for her own freedom, but for others she had never met. Together then, he said. They infiltrated the facility during a shift change, using Elena's signal jammers to create blind spots in the security network. Marcus's experience with mining equipment proved invaluable as they cut through reinforced barriers. Kira's growing abilities allowed her to disable electronic locks and security systems with a touch. The laboratory they found was a sterile nightmare. 17 chambers lined the walls, each containing a figure similar to Kira, but in various stages of development. Some were fully formed, others appeared younger, all floating in glowing suspension fluid. "My siblings," Kira whispered, her luminescence pulsing in harmony with the chamber lights. Catherine Reed, the project's lead scientist, emerged from the shadows with armed guards. A woman in her 60s, with cold gray eyes and the demeanor of someone who viewed life as data to be manipulated. "Subject 17 returns," she said calmly. "Your escape provided valuable data about psychological conditioning failures." "Thank you." "Let them go," Marcus demanded, raising the weapon Elena had insisted he carry. "They are not prisoners, Mr. Chen. They are experiments, no different from laboratory mice. Reed's voice held no emotion, and they will fulfill their purpose, whether voluntarily or through forced conditioning. Kira stepped forward, her hand touching the nearest chamber. Light flowed from her fingertips into the laboratory systems. You created us to bridge human and alien consciousness, but you never understood what that truly means. It means you follow programming, Reed snapped, signaling her guards. No, Kira said softly, her luminescence spreading throughout the entire laboratory. It means we choose our own path. The stasis chambers began opening simultaneously. As each of Kira's siblings awakened, their combined luminescence created a network of light that overwhelmed the facility's systems. Alarms blared as security barriers failed and communication systems overloaded. Reed's guards found their weapons malfunctioning as the energy field disrupted all electronics. In the chaos, Marcus and Elena helped guide the newly awakened beings toward the exit routes they had mapped. This is impossible, Reed protested as her life's work crumbled around her. Kira turned back, her silver eyes filled with something Reed had never programmed into her subjects: compassion. You taught us to dream, Dr. Reed. You just never expected us to dream of freedom. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the porch of the research station they had established in a remote valley in northern Canada. The facility, built with Elena's foundation funding and international support, had become a sanctuary for the 18 beings who now called themselves the Awakened. Each of Kira's siblings had developed unique abilities as their consciousness expanded beyond their original programming. Some could interface with vast computer networks, others could manipulate energy fields, and a few had shown remarkable healing abilities. Together, they represented a new form of life that bridged the gap between organic and technological existence. Elena emerged from the main laboratory, her face bright with excitement. The neural mapping results are incredible. Their consciousness exists simultaneously in biological and quantum states. They're literally thinking in ways we never imagined possible. Marcus watched Kira in the distance, working with her youngest sibling, a being who called himself Echo. She was teaching him to control his luminescence, showing him how emotion and ability were connected. Her patience and gentleness reminded Marcus daily that consciousness and compassion were not incompatible with technological enhancement. The UN delegation arrives tomorrow, Elena continued. They want to establish formal diplomatic relations with the Awakened. Are they ready for that? Marcus asked. Kira thinks so. She says they need to find their place in the larger world, not hide from it. Elena paused. She's been asking about you, you know, about whether you plan to stay. Marcus had been wrestling with that question for weeks. His old life was gone, destroyed the moment he chose to help a crashed alien in the Nevada desert. But this new life, surrounded by beings who challenged every assumption about consciousness and existence, felt more real than anything he had experienced since losing his family. Kira approached the porch, her luminescence soft and warm in the evening light. Marcus, I wanted to thank you before the delegation arrives tomorrow. Thank me for what? For seeing me as a person when I did not yet know what that meant. She touched his hand gently, that familiar, warm sensation spreading between them. You taught me that choice, not programming, defines who we are. Marcus looked at this extraordinary being who had transformed from a frightened escapee into a leader of her people. You taught me something too, Kira. You showed me that life is worth living, even when it's not the life you planned. Elena smiled, recognizing the moment for what it was. I'll leave you two to figure out whatever this is between you. As she walked away, Kira moved closer to Marcus. If I continue to affect your biology in unexpected ways, will you still blame me for it? Marcus laughed, remembering her first words to him in the desert. That depends. Are you planning to spill on me again? Every day, if you let me. Her silver eyes held depths of emotion that her creators never could have programmed. I am still learning what it means to love someone, but I know I do not want to learn without you. Marcus pulled her close, marveling at how this strange, impossible woman had saved him as much as he had saved her. Together, they watched the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors, while around them, the awakened began their evening songs, harmonies that bridged biological consciousness with technological possibility. In choosing to help one lost being, Marcus had discovered that humanity's greatest strength was not its technology or its weapons, but its capacity to see consciousness and dignity in unexpected forms. The future would bring new challenges as humans and the awakened learn to coexist. But tonight, under the vast Canadian sky, it felt like anything was possible. The story had no ending, only endless new chapters waiting to be written by beings who chose love over programming, freedom over fear, and hope over certainty.